Hello, my name is Kay Miller. A lot of people know me as Mystic Rose on TikTok and some other social media platforms. I post all about esoteric knowledge and a little bit about secret societies. So today we're going to be talking about the history of mystery schools, esoteric knowledge, and secret societies. So I think before we get started, I think it's really important to emphasize that esoteric mystical traditions and mystery schools has really existed since our most ancient civilizations. I would say that the sort of vows of secrecy and acts of initiation could go all the way back to ancient Mesopotamia, one of our first civilizations. But more importantly, we see this in ancient Egypt and ancient Greece and Rome. And so I think that that's kind of important to clear out of the way before we get into this video, because this sort of idea of secret societies has kind of had a sort of bad stereotype, and it's kind of been tied into a lot of conspiracy theories and things like that. But what's really important to note here is that the sort of need for secrecy has really thrived and existed throughout all of our ancient religions and civilizations. We even see this in Abrahamic faiths, because a lot of people, they tend to actually think that in the Abrahamic faiths that they're sort of actually restricted in a sense, where they have a more dogmatic and strict religious black and white sort of teaching, and that's so far from the truth. When we look at Abrahamic faiths, we actually see in ancient Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, there are mystical traditions within all of these. So in this video, I'm going to kind of briefly walk through a lot of these ancient mystical traditions and the mystery schools throughout the ages. So I hope you enjoy. So I think the first thing that's really important to talk about is, what is esotericism? Esotericism basically means hidden. And then we have exoteric, which means more widely known and accepted, right? And so I would say that the esoteric is sort of the inner and oral traditions and teachings that have sort of been passed down throughout generations and generations. Hearing the sort of secrets of whether that's scripture or a teaching, that is the esoteric. The exoteric would be the sort of story and the literal understanding, and the esoteric would be what's underneath it, ripping apart the veil and sort of understanding its language behind it. And so that is something that is extremely important to note, is that that has existed throughout all religions. Now that we've kind of gotten the understanding of what is esotericism, now let's kind of look into what is the goal of the adept. What we're striving for is to be an adept. And an adept is basically a wise one, one that's mastered the great work. And so throughout many ancient traditions and mystery schools, there's been a common goal. And these factors include connection to the divine, the Godhead, and the monad, or the Tao. We also have a quest for immortality. This has also been a very, very strong tradition that we can see going back to ancient Egypt. And a lot of the mystery schools promised immortality. Also, another goal was harmonic union with the self, the soul, and inner transformation. So the harmonic union can kind of manifest in different ways. Throughout alchemy, we can kind of see that it manifests in the sense of the alchemical marriage of masculine and feminine. Another goal as well was the understanding of hidden symbolism. The existence of symbols has been a way for man to kind of connect to the divine. And so you could see that symbolism and very similar symbols are existing throughout all these religions, and they're all telling very similar stories. And the last one is to have a deeper understanding of nature and the universe and man. So understanding the microcosm and the macrocosm. You can kind of see, actually, especially during the Renaissance, there was like a flourishing of humanism and sort of the microcosmic man at the center of the universe, and that the universe was inside man as well as outside. And so that's actually one of the Hermetic principles, which we'll be getting into Hermeticism in a bit. But as within, so without, as above, so below, as in heaven, so on earth, things like that. And so that within itself, even the study of the divine anatomy of living beings, not even just humans, but just everything in nature and into the animal kingdom and things like that, that within itself is definitely a goal, because it brings this sort of harmony of understanding to the mystic seeker. So essentially, the etymology of the word mystery can come back, it goes back to Greek. And then we see Latin as well, with the word mysterium. But traditionally, a lot of scholars have thought this word to derive from the Greek word mio, and this means to close or shut, chiefly referring to the shutting of the eyes. So hence one who shuts their eyes is initiated into the mysteries. And so I think that the etymology of just the word mystery alone is very, very interesting, because we could see that the tradition of being blindfolded, not speaking, shutting the mouth, shutting the eyes, is actually an act of peering into the mysteries and an act of initiation. And so in this picture here, actually, it shows a engraving by Raphael Custos, and this is a pretty iconic esoteric piece of artwork, and it's showing the different stages of alchemy, as we can see. So we can actually see an initiate being blindfolded here in this imagery. So now that we've kind of covered that, I think it's really important to now really understand the reasoning behind secrecy and why it has persisted and existed throughout ancient times. The first one would be preservation of sacred knowledge. So esoteric knowledge has long been kept sacred through the confines of safeguarding their knowledge from misuse or misinterpretation. By maintaining secrecy, they aim to protect the integrity and the purity of the teachings. So I think that's kind of like the main sort of reasoning for secrecy, is it's sort of safeguarding it from its misuse and misinterpretation. The second one we have is initiation and hierarchical structures. So secrecy has been associated with initiation rituals and hierarchical structures within mystical or spiritual organizations. Initiations are required to undergo specific processes and experiences before gaining access to deeper teachings. Secrecy serves as a way to distinguish between initiates and non-initiates and ensure that the teachings are transmitted properly and to the right individuals. And then we have socio-political factors. So in certain historical periods, practicing esoteric or mystical traditions might have been seen as subversive or conflicting with prevailing religious or political authorities. In such cases, secrecy was employed to protect practitioners from persecution or suppression. So now let's get into ancient Mesopotamia. So ancient Mesopotamia is the oldest known civilization in human history. It had a vast growing culture and religion that lasted for over 3 millennia. Something we can see in ancient Mesopotamia, because like I said, we don't really see the sort of mystery schools in ancient Mesopotamia. We more so see that in Egypt, but there were temples in ancient Mesopotamia, and they were central to religious life and social life. And so within these temples, specialized priesthoods conducted rituals and ceremonies that were not accessible to the general public. These rituals often involved purification, offerings, and communion with the deities. The priesthoods held knowledge of specific religious practices, sacred texts, and rituals which were transmitted within their ranks. In ancient Mesopotamia, there actually was this myth and lore around wise ones or sages. And this was a half fish and half human sage. But they were believed to have been sent by the gods to teach the Mesopotamians culture, civilization, knowledge, writing. So now let's get into ancient Egypt. So ancient Egyptian mystery schools were deeply embedded in the religious and cultural fabric of ancient Egypt. Many of the pharaohs were initiates of these schools and used their wisdom to rule their kingdom. The wisdom of the mystery schools also had a significant influence on other cultures, and it is believed that famous philosophers such as Pythagoras, Plato, and Herodotus studied in these schools during their travels to Egypt and then brought back these teachings to Greece, influencing Greek philosophy and culture. So the pyramid texts, which contain mystical and ritualistic elements, are considered one of the earliest known examples of Egyptian esoteric teachings and date back to the Old Kingdom. Additionally, the coffin texts and Book of the Dead, which evolved from the pyramid texts, further reflect the tradition of mystical knowledge and initiatory practices in ancient Egypt. These texts contain instructions and prayers intended to guide the deceased to the journey of the soul after death. Something that's really important is knowing that a lot of esoteric traditions and secret societies like the Freemasons and the Rosicrucians, they sort of tie in their teachings to a passed down tradition that's coming from ancient Egypt. So now let's get into the Greco-Roman cults. So we can also see a massive birth of mystery schools in the Greek and Roman cults with their secret rites and initiations. such as the Eleusinian mysteries, the Orphic mysteries, the Bacchic and the Dionysic rites, the cult of Mithras, the cult of Isis, and the cult of Venus, and so on. The influence of these cults diminished with the rise of Christianity, which eventually became the state religion of the Roman Empire. However, their impact can still be seen in the iconography and the rituals of various modern religious and esoteric traditions. So now we're going to get into a really important figure, and this is Pythagoras. So Pythagoras was an ancient Greek philosopher and mathematician, and he left a profound legacy that continues to shape our understanding of mathematics, music, and philosophy today. And most commonly, people know him today through the Pythagorean theorem. So we can actually see another secret society, and that was the Pythagorean Brotherhood. And so the Pythagorean Brotherhood was an ancient secret society that was founded in the 6th century BCE by Pythagoras. So the initiation into the Pythagorean Brotherhood was not a simple process. It was strict, long, and a secret ritual. The society was divided into an inner circle known as the Mathematikoi and the Akousamatokoi. So the Mathematikoi were the learners, and then we have the Akousamatokoi, which were the listeners. And so the novices, or the listeners, they had to go through a period of silence for several years. This was designed to learn self-discipline and to demonstrate the ability to keep secrets. The most devoted followers became members of the inner circle, and they lived at the society and had no personal possessions, and they were vegetarians. So something that's really important about Pythagoras and his brotherhood was that they believed that numbers were the fundamental aspects of reality. And so the first 10 numbers to the brotherhood of Pythagoras were seen as the seed patterns for all the principles of the cosmos, beginning with a point, which is the essence of a circle, and using the geometer's tools of a compass, straight edge, and a pencil. Pythagoras called the circle the most perfect monad of created forms, without beginning or end, without sides or corners. Therefore, he associated the circle with the number 1 and monotheism. So now that we've discussed a little bit about Pythagoras, Greek and Roman cults, and things like that, now it's time to get into the Hellenistic era. And so the Hellenistic era was essentially marked after Alexander the Great's death. And so we can see during the Hellenistic era, this was marked by the spread of Greek culture across the territories conquered by Alexander the Great in the 4th century BCE. These territories stretched from Greece and Egypt in the west to India in the east. So in religion, this period was marked by syncretism, or the blending of different religious beliefs and practices. As Greek culture came in contact with other cultures, gods, and religious practices, they began to merge. The mystery cults also flourished during this time. And so this is actually where we're going to see the rise of Hermeticism. We actually see that this is where Hermeticism starts to take place. It's generally believed to have been started in the late Hellenistic era. For those who do kind of understand Hermeticism a little bit, that's kind of where we get the figure of Hermes Trismegistus in Hermeticism. So we have the Greek Hermes that sort of merged with the Egyptian Thoth. And so both of these gods sort of merged into one being named Hermes Trismegistus. And so this is where we get the sort of foundations of Hermeticism. So now let's kind of get into the Emerald Tablets and the Corpus Hermeticum. This is like a very vital and important study due to it having so much vast influence on the Renaissance era, and aspects like humanism, like we were talking about, so like the humanist movements and things like that in the Renaissance era, as well as it highly influenced a lot of Christian theology. And so the core text of Hermeticism is the Emerald Tablets and the Corpus Hermeticum. So the origins of the Emerald Tablet are shrouded in mystery and are believed to date back to the ancient times. The precise time of its emergence is uncertain. The earliest known reference to the Emerald Tablet can be traced to the 8th century in the Arabic texts, which claim that it was an ancient text of wisdom written by Hermes Trismegistus. However, the original composition of the Emerald Tablet is believed to be even older, with some speculating that it could have been originated during the Hellenistic period in Egypt. The Emerald Tablet gained greater prominence during the medieval period when various translations and interpretations of the text emerged. So, And we're going to really see that the reemergence of the Corpus Hermeticum coming into play through Cosimo de' Medici, and when he had one of Greek's leading scholars, Marsilio Ficino, translate this text for him. And so the Corpus Hermeticum is really shrouded in a lot of mystery. It's said that it was hidden or lost for centuries. But the revival sort of happened during the marking beginnings of the Renaissance period. It was during this time that the Emerald Tablet became a central piece of mystical and alchemical literature, exerting a significant influence on Western esoteric traditions. The corpus includes dialogues, treatises, and hymns that explore spiritual and philosophical themes, presenting a vision of the nature of the divine, the cosmos, and the potential for spiritual enlightenment. And so we can see that through the revival of Hermeticism through Marsilio Ficino, that it actually later on sort of penetrated into the minds of men like Isaac Newton. So Newton actually was very strongly involved in the Hermetic sciences, and during his time, this was a time of where religion and science and mysticism were sort of still all kind of in this inner sort of minglement. And so Isaac Newton, actually, we know from his Newton papers and the manuscripts in his journals that he studied alchemy and Hermeticism very fervently. And he actually dedicated 3 decades of his life to practicing alchemy and trying to discover the philosopher's stone. And so we can see, figures like Isaac Newton and Robert Boyle. They were, really immersed in the Hermetic sciences, and they actually wrote many different letters back and forth about the Hermetic sciences together. And Isaac Newton actually warned Robert Boyle to be more secretive and quiet regarding alchemy and Hermeticism. So it's really interesting to see that sort of the foundations of modern science, the founding of the Royal Society of London, and things like that we'll be getting into. If I'm not mistaken, Sir Robert Murray, he was one of the first recorded Freemasons, and he basically co-founded the Royal Society of London. And then we see Elias Ashmole as well. He also was one of the first recorded English Freemasons. And his sort of role in the Royal Society wasn't as prominent. And so now that we kind of have an understanding of the Corpus Hermeticum and Hermeticism reviving in the Renaissance era and it influencing men like Isaac Newton and Robert Boyle, now it's time to get into the Rosicrucians. This was a secret society that was centered around Christian teachings. And this was actually a direct aftermath of the Protestant Reformation. So, mind you, the Rosicrucian movement was happening a little bit before, like a few decades before Isaac Newton. Losing my mind. Okay, maybe these will help. And so why I'm going to leave this with the Rosicrucians is that this was a secret society that actually formed as a direct aftermath of the Christian Protestant Reformation. And the Rosicrucians, they were a secret society that actually were seeking a universal reformation of religion and science. And so we kind of see this like emergence and revival of the ancient mystical traditions being revived to Europe. Really, this is really prominent because we actually see all of what we just talked about in the core manifestos that arose in Germany in the 17th century. And so we have things like Hermeticism and Kabbalah and alchemy that are actually talked about in these core manifestos. The Rosicrucians actually emerged during the reign of Queen Elizabeth Stuart and Frederick V. And so this was actually King James's daughter. And so her rule as the Winter Queen with her Winter King essentially actually sparked the revival and the emergence of the Rosicrucian fraternity. And so as quickly as the Rosicrucian manifestos arose and the sort of uproar happened, it quickly boiled down after their winter reign. And so to understand the Rosicrucians is really it's a long study, but what I'll kind of talk about in this video really briefly is that the study of the Rosicrucian movement can really be understood, in my personal opinion, through reading Frances Yates. Her book on the Rosicrucian Enlightenment is very strongly emphasized on its historical analysis because she was a historian and a scholar. So with the Rosicrucians, They were very unique in the sense that they were embracing ancient mystical traditions, but they had a Christian lens. And they actually claim in their manifestos that these teachings are nothing new. It's not their own, and that this was basically passed down through ancient traditions and also Judaism. So a lot of what they talk about in the manifestos is actually Kabbalah. So a quote from the Confessio Fraternitatis, which is the Second Manifesto, says, "Those who receive this knowledge shall become masters of all arts and crafts. No secret shall be hidden from them, and all good works of the past, present, and future shall be accessed to them. The whole world shall become as one book, and contradictions of science and theology shall be reconciled. Rejoice, O humanity, for the time has come when God has decreed that the number of our fraternity shall be increased." And actually, one of the first references to a Mason word actually is coming from a pamphlet in 1638, and it says this quote right here about the rosy cross of the Mason word. So with all of that being said, I think it's going to be really important for me to make another video on a lot of the traditions that actually started to arise in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. This is actually particularly where I really study. But for the time's sake of this video, that is where I'm going to end it off on. So I hope today you learned a little bit more about secret societies and mystery schools and initiations that kind of span all throughout religious cultures and ancient civilizations. And so yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I will definitely be back to create more esoteric content. Yeah, okay.